It's a great pleasure for me to present the job we do in Latour Hospital in Geneva. Foot core strengthening, injury prevention and rehabilitation for runners. First of all, what is core stability? What do we mean, physiotherapists, medical doctors, when we speak about core stability, core strength, and so on? For sure, we speak about the lumbar hip pelvic stability in order to provide us with the ability to perform proper movements with the lower limbs. So this is linked to the concept of local stabilizers and global movers in terms of muscles. The local stabilizers, as you know, are these muscles with the small cross-sectional areas and small moment arms, for example, the multifidus or the transverse abdominis here at the trunk level. And they are in charge of increasing the intersegmental stability. Then, from this stable base, the primary movers, for example, the latissimus dorsi at the trunk, can generate a proper gross motion. What if these muscles are weak or inefficient? Of course, as you all know, there is unstable and misalignment of the proximal foundation, then abnormal movement patterns at the lower limbs, and then probably a higher risk of lower extremity injuries. So back to the foot now. I don't want to bother you with anatomy, but anyway, it's important to consider that what muscles are involved in this core stability at the foot. These are the intrinsic foot muscles, which means the muscles with the origin and the insertion within the foot. They are distributed around 4 levels, 4 layers, and I just wanted to highlight 3 of them: the abductor hallucis, the number 1, the flexor digitorum brevis, the number 2, and also the flexor hallucis brevis, the number 8, because they will be the ones easily accessible for electrostimulation, so we are going to speak about that later on. Anatomy, so definition, anatomy, now the functions. I'm going to use some acronyms during this presentation. So intrinsic foot muscles, IFM, medial longitudinal arch of the foot, MLA. The function of the medial arch is to compress and to recoil in response to being loaded. This is important because we must now forget, since the great job of my friend Kelly, Luke Kelly, who worked in Aspetar in Qatar in the same time as myself, we know that these IFM muscles, they have a great task, a great role, and not only the plantar aponeurosis in that. Not only the plantar aponeurosis or the plantar fascia is able to maintain the medial arch of the foot. So that's the concept of foot spring mechanism. So the mechanical energy is stored and then released during each foot contact, for example, during running. So as a summary, intrinsic foot muscles, they contribute to power absorption and generation of the foot. They limit the strain on the plantar aponeurosis because they are agonists, and they facilitate an efficient ground force transmission. 2 remarks about the function and the characteristics of these intrinsic foot muscles. That one is not a brand new one, this reference, but you can see that there is a concept of fine-tuning. It means this muscle group is really able to adapt its activity according to the demand. So more active during the dynamic activities, more active when the demand increases. For example, and thanks to Luke Kelly again, for example, more active during a single leg activities and during a double leg activity. So it's really this concept of fine-tuning for that muscles. Of course, it's not the purpose today, but they have also a huge proprioception and sensory motor task. So, no, this is not me. No, sorry. No. This is Boris Gojanovic, by the way. He's available at the lunch break. So, we see now that it makes sense. It makes sense to speak and to try to promote this foot core strength concept. But we have to examine what happens if these muscles are inefficient? What happens if these muscles are not properly activated? So the next couple of slides are about that. From an epidemiological perspective, if the intrinsic muscles or the MLA is inefficient, we know that we will have an excessive deformation of the arch and then an overload of the plantar fascia. So definitely involved in the plantar fasciopathy. We can discuss this later. Second, you have the references here. It has been shown that if there is no good pronation control, and that's very interesting according to the former presentation, of course, I will speak about overpronation or excessive pronation, but it's uncontrolled excessive pronation, which is the proper wording. Then, of course, we can have excessive or uncontrolled pronation leading to medial tibial stress syndrome. From more a biomechanical perspective, in terms more of performance, what if the medial arch is not efficient? Of course, a less rigid foot, as the midfoot remains unlocked, is gonna lead to a less efficient propulsion and transmission through the foot lever. So in terms of performance, it is affected if you do not have a great control of the intrinsic foot muscles. Back to injuries. If we have a poor control of the MLA, so with flattening, kind of flattening, uncontrolled pronation, of course you are going to change the angle of pull of the Achilles tendon. That's the so-called whipping mechanism. It means that this 2D over movement, okay, of the eversion from the rear side is going to provide the Achilles tendon with an excessive torsion, provoking an anoxia of the fibers and so on. So that's quite interesting in terms of injury prevention. Last but not least, from a study we conducted in Qatar in 2014, what if that muscles are under fatigue? We asked a couple of good distance runners to perform a running to exhaustion at 95% of the maximal aerobic speed. And then we measured using the XPEDAR system the plantar pressure distribution at the beginning and at the end of that. And then we noticed that the only significant changes were at the medial arch area here, with an increased relative load in a fatigue state, which means that we have this flattening or loss of control of the medial arch of the foot under fatigue. Even these subjects were very good for that parameter before the start. Okay? So the fatigue in this case is a very interesting one. It's also very interesting in terms of what we can do in terms of injury prevention, for example, before a long run. So now that we know the issues, we can speak about the strategy. So the foot core strengthening strategy. That's exactly what we try to explain with my friend Patrick McKeown from Ithaca University in New York in 2015. The strategy is in 3 steps. First of all, isolated foot core training. These are the basics intrinsic foot muscle reinforcement exercises. Second, the isolated neuromuscular electrostimulation of that muscles. And then third step, the integration of everything together. So the 1 and the 2 plus the specific task. So I'm sorry about that video because we tried our best but it doesn't run. So I'm going to explain you. The purpose of that video was to show you the difference between the 2 curl, the exercise, you know, we always demonstrate with a towel, putting the foot on the towel and then grasping like that, and the short foot exercise. Just a quick reminder about the anatomy. No intrinsic foot muscles insertion on the distal phalangia, which means if you ask your patient to perform this kind of movement, It's not wrong, but it's not specific at all of the intrinsic foot muscles. The one which is specific is that one. You can see here that there is nothing about the distal phalangia. Everything happened at the second and the first, where the intrinsic foot muscle inserts and then where it pulls. Here we are. From the top, the short foot exercise, you can see here relaxation, then contraction, and hyperextension of the last phalangia. Because the pull is here, the tension is here. But it's not the only exercise about foot core strength. A very, very good study, a very recent one, in 2016, showed that 3 other exercises are very efficient. First of all, the toes spread out exercise. That one. Second, the first 2 extension exercise. And third, the second to fifth 2 extension. This study is from the team of Jay Ertel. They just assess the percentage increase in muscle activation for all that intrinsic foot muscles one by one using dynamic MRI. It's a great job. And then, to cut a long story short, they concluded that each of the 4 exercises was associated with an increased activation in all the plantar intrinsic foot muscles evaluated. So we really have a choice in the exercises we can provide our patient with in terms of recruitment of the intrinsic foot muscles. Now, second step, isolated neuromuscular electrostimulation. A little bit of history, how it did start. It started, by the way, in my hometown, in Reims, in France, in 2004. So it's not quite new. A podiatrist over there did only 1 session of electrostimulation of the abductor hallucis, and then he recorded the changes in the foot plantar pressure distribution in a static position. And then they were very happy to see that there was a lateral displacement of the anterior maximal pressure point. Easily, there is a supination effect. Stimulation of the medial arch of the foot, 1 session, something like 12 or 15 minutes, 1 session, supination effect. And they reassessed 2 months later. It persisted 2 months later. So there is probably some central effect in that. There is probably some proprioceptive effect in that. Let's discuss this later. Second step, during walking. Darren James, who is a researcher in London, stimulated the intrinsic foot muscles, and he showed that a better activation and strength of that muscle promoted a better forefoot and rear foot coordination during the mid-stance. It means a more stable foot. Okay, a better control between the rear foot and the forefoot during the gait. And then we come to our own experimentation. So this one was performed in 2009 by myself in Qatar. We are not now over a single session. We are over a 6 weeks training, 3 sessions a week. Okay? So it's really a strengthening protocol of the medial arch of the foot by electrostimulation, and then we assessed by the navicular drop in Arabic athletes. And then we saw that in this protocol, the navicular drop decreased in the tested group. It means neuromuscular stimulation probably increased, facilitated, improved the medial arch control, the medial arch support. The last one here, so we did static, we did walking, and now we do dynamic. We did a protocol of strengthening, so sweat electrostimulation and active movements. And then we measured the foot plantar pressure distribution using the X-pedal again during running sprint activity. And then we were very happy to see that we have the same lateral shift of the foot plantar pressure distribution. This supination effect I mentioned before in static position for the first study of Gaillet, we had the same during running. And it was quite interesting for us in order to, I would say, support the medial arch of the foot in dynamic tasks and probably prevent uncontrolled hyperpronation. So, how it does work? Here is the stimulation, here are the electrodes. You have two opportunities for the electrodes, or like that, or that one can be a little bit more backward here, exactly on the body muscle of the abductor hallucis. Okay? This line here is the level of the navicular tubercle at the rest position now, and then when the stimulation is on, you will see the arrow here. You stimulate elevation of the arch and resting position. Check as well here. You have really a short foot effect, and when the relaxation, you lengthen again. So it's really elevation and increase of the stiffness of the medial arch of the foot. Integration. I wanted to show you that one. I'm sure that you have some patients with Achilles tendinopathy and so on, and then you provide them with some exercises in eccentric, kind of Stanish or Alfredson protocol. We know that we have to take care about the positioning of the foot doing that exercises because, as you may know, a lot of people, they try to escape in supination when they are at the top of the heel raise. It's easier to raise the heel and then to go in supination, okay? So we have to avoid this shift here. You can see the next one is gonna correct it and is gonna go more medially there. This is possible to achieve if you ask your patient to perform in the same time the short foot exercise. So you ask him to perform the short foot exercise and then perform the heel raise. And then he's gonna have a rigid lever, he's gonna have a strong foot, and then he's gonna perform in the right position. Second one, dynamic task. Hopping, stimulation in the same time. That's part of what we do. It's very important to promote this kind of thing. It means integration of the stimulation during the dynamic task. A short one, maybe we can discuss the questions later on about that. A short one, foot core strengthening. Is it enough to run barefoot in order to strengthen my intrinsic foot muscles? According to the publication and to the science, probably not. Why? Because as we all know, we have to be at a certain percentage of the maximal voluntary contraction in order to have a really hypertrophic effect. And according to the number of steps we do while running, of course we are not at that regimen. So probably there is an effect from a neuromuscular perspective, but not in terms of hypertrophy while running. That's why we hardly think it's a must to help this process by additional strengthening. The conclusion, what we already know, so the function of the intrinsic foot muscles, medial arch support during standing, walking, jogging, running. Better activation and strength of these muscles reduce uncontrolled and excessive pronation. Better activation and strength of that muscle can modulate this forefoot, rear foot coordination during the mid-stance, so more stable foot. Then we have seen the active exercises for the foot core strengthening of course, the short foot exercise, but now the 3 others as well. And then the electro-stimulation for the foot core strengthening as well. Perspectives. Again, and we discussed this with Blaise Dubois a couple of weeks ago because he was in Geneva. And we really think that there is a need to strengthen, in addition, the foot core system for the transition while passing from the normal shoes to the minimalist shoes. And regarding the electro-stimulation of the medial arch, probably the huge effect is also the post-tetanic potentiation. So we are really impressed by the effect of one session only. We have to make further research about this. One short session can really affect the posture and the response of this muscle, and that's quite interesting in pre-activity period. Thank you very much. Thank you to Patrick McKeown, my colleague, and thank you for my supervisors in Latour, Finn Mahler, Olivier Rim, and Boris Gojanovic, for their usual support.